I took a Firewatch job this spring after my life fell apart. Yep, Firewatch jobs is a thing. I'd just been laid off, dumped, and priced out of my apartment in Portland. A buddy from college worked with the Forestry Service in Northern California and said they needed someone to man a tower for the early season, April through May. Just watch for smoke, check in twice a day on the radio, keep a log. Isolated, quiet, decent pay. It sounded perfect, like breathing room. The tower sat on a ridge overlooking a dense valley, about 50 miles from the nearest town. You couldn't drive all the way up. You parked at the base and hiked the last mile. There was a cabin at the bottom, stocked with backup supplies, but the main tower had what I needed: propane stove, bunk, radio, and a long-range scope mounted on a rusted tripod. The first few days were fine, lonely, but peaceful. Spring hadn't fully arrived. Patches of snow still clung to the shadows, but the valley below was waking up. Pale green tips on the trees, damp soil, birds returning. It was beautiful and silent. But by the end of the first week, the silence felt different. During the day, it was manageable. You hear the occasional animal, wind in the trees, your own breathing. But at night, that quiet goes deep. It settles in your stomach, makes you feel like something's listening. Not in a haunted way, just in the way a predator listens. I didn't sleep well. Around the 8th day, I woke up in the middle of the night with the overwhelming sense that something had just spoken my name. Not a voice exactly, more like the ghost of a voice right behind the ears. I sat up and listened. Nothing. No wind. No bugs. Just that thick, oppressive stillness. I chalked it up to isolation. I was barely speaking aloud anymore. Just check-ins on the radio at 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., short and routine. Tower 12, no visible smoke, all clear. On the 10th day, I logged something unusual. Late morning, sky overcast. I was scanning the eastern tree line when I saw a thin trail of smoke. Not a blaze, just a small, narrow plume rising slowly above the pines. It wasn't on any burn schedule, and it was too far from the nearest campground. Protocol said I had to check it out. I logged my departure, packed a day bag, and hiked out. It took 2 hours to reach the spot. The path down was steep, with loose gravel and moss-covered roots. I kept expecting to see someone, another ranger, a hiker, but the forest stayed empty. When I reached the clearing where the smoke should have been, there was no fire, no people, just a half-burned log in the center of a circle of disturbed soil. The fire had been real. Ash still clung to the ground. The log was blackened on one side, but there were no footprints, no discarded gear, not even trash. I walked the perimeter. Nothing. And the weird part? The log was still warm. I stayed there for a while, scanning the tree line. I didn't feel watched exactly, but I didn't feel alone either. Eventually, I hiked back and radioed it in. Old campfire. No sign of occupants. Site cold. That night, I locked the tower door. I'd never done that before. Around 2:30 a.m., someone knocked. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I didn't move. Just lay there, wide-eyed in the dark, heart pounding. I waited for footsteps, for the sound of someone moving around the balcony that wrapped the tower. Nothing. Just silence. I stayed frozen until the sun came up. When I finally stepped outside, the air was crisp, the sky was clear, and there were no footprints. None at all. Not even my own from the day before. I didn't mention it in the next radio check-in. The following afternoon, I scanned the area again. No smoke, no movement, but something felt off. The wind had shifted. The trees below looked wrong. I don't know how else to explain it. Just a sense that things weren't in the same place they'd been before. Then I noticed the reflection. On the ridge opposite my tower, about half a mile away, a flash of light. Just for a second, like sun-off glass. I raised the binoculars and scanned the slope. Nothing but trees. Then another flash, lower this time, closer to the ground. I stared for 10 minutes. Nothing. I told myself it was just water or rock. But that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone else was up there. Not a ranger, not a camper, someone who wasn't supposed to be. The next day, I checked the trail cams mounted along the supply path. There was one near the base of the tower, another down by the old fire road. The memory cards were still warm from the sun. I reviewed the footage on my old laptop. Nothing for hours. Then, just after 2 a.m., movement. Someone walked past the lower cam. Not fast, not hiding, just walking. Mid-stride, head down, no flashlight, no pack, just dark clothes and something long in one hand. A stick, maybe, or a tool. I scrubbed forward. 40 minutes later, another shape. Lower this time, crawling almost. Same direction. Neither of them showed up on the upper cam. That night, I stayed up with the lights off, watching the woods. Just before 3 a.m., I saw movement at the edge of the clearing, far off, just where the trees thinned. A figure, still, watching. I didn't go outside. At sunrise, they were gone. I called the regional office, told them someone was wandering near my tower at night. Probably trespassers. They said they'd send someone to check the perimeter in a day or two, but advised me not to engage. Keep the radio close. Stay alert. I wanted to leave. I thought about packing my gear and hiking down, but something in me wanted to see it through. Wanted to understand. 2 days later, just after 5 p.m., I smelled smoke again. This time, I didn't radio it in. I just watched. It came from the same direction, the eastern ridge. The plume was thicker now, darker, rising in uneven bursts, like someone was burning something wet. I scanned the slope for movement. Nothing. Then I saw it. A shape standing still in the smoke. Tall, unmoving, too far to make out details. No backpack, no visible gear, just watching. I blinked, and it was gone. That night, I nailed the tower door shut from the inside, stacked the table and chair in front of it, slept in my boots. At 3:18 a.m., I heard the knocks again. 3. Slow. Louder this time. Then something scraped against the outside of the wall. A long dragging sound, like a branch or a knife. I didn't sleep after that. I left at first light. Didn't wait for the next check-in. Didn't collect the rest of my gear. Just packed the essentials. Radioed a generic no visible smoke, Tower 12 clear, and started hiking down. At the bottom, near the trailhead, I saw something that stopped me cold. Another fire, still smoking, smoldering, just like before. Except this one had something inside it. At first, I thought it was a bag or a rolled tarp, but the shape was wrong. Slumped, human-sized. I didn't go closer. I called the office from the ranger station an hour later and told them everything. They sent a team up the next morning. The official report came back with nothing. No fire, no body, no tracks. Just an empty tower and an overdue Firewatch log. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear the knocking. In dreams, in silence. Sometimes it's not 3 knocks anymore. It's 4. When my sister invited me to spend a few days at her new place in Vermont, I said yes without really thinking. I needed a break. My job had been grinding me down for months, and the idea of fresh air, no emails, no obligations, it sounded perfect. She and her husband had just moved into a 2-story farmhouse built sometime in the 1930s. It sat at the end of a gravel road surrounded by forest on all sides. The place was old, but they'd done some work. New appliances, polished wood floors, fresh paint in some of the rooms, but not all of them. They gave me the guest room upstairs, and it felt like a leftover space, smaller than the others, a little colder. The floorboards creaked when I walked across them, and there was this musty, floral scent that hung in the air, like perfume someone wore decades ago and never washed out. The wallpaper was yellowed and soft to the touch. Thin little flowers climbing vines that didn't quite match at the seams. The bed was low and firm, and a tall brass-frame mirror sat above the old wooden dresser against the far wall. It wasn't a bad room, but from the first night, something about it felt wrong. At first night, I fell asleep fast, exhausted from the drive. But sometime around 2:30 a.m., I woke up. There wasn't a noise, nothing sudden or loud. I just woke up with the strong feeling that someone had been in the room. Not like a dream, just that moment you feel before someone touches your shoulder. The room was dark, except for the glow from the hallway light spilling under the door. I sat up, looked around, and saw that the mirror on the dresser was crooked, just slightly. It had been straight earlier. I remembered setting my bag down and catching my reflection, dead center, before going to bed. Now the angle was off, barely noticeable, but enough to feel intentional. I got up, adjusted it, and stood there for a minute. The wallpaper behind the mirror looked wrinkled in a way that didn't match the rest, like it had been peeled back at one point and pressed down again by a clumsy hand. I went back to bed. The next morning, I mentioned it casually over coffee. My sister laughed and said, "That room used to belong to the man who built the house. He died in there, actually, in his sleep, like 100 years ago." Her husband chuckled. "Old farmhouse stuff. Everything here's got a weird little story." I laughed too, but that didn't sit right with me. Not because I believe in ghosts, but because the room didn't feel like a place where someone died peacefully in their sleep. It felt like a place where someone tried to get out and failed. That night, I stayed up reading in bed with the light on. Around 2 a.m., I dozed off. I woke up again at 2:41, same minute as the night before. The room was freezing. Not just chilly, cold enough that I could see my breath when I sat up. And the mirror was crooked again, worse than before. This time, I walked over and gently lifted it off the wall. It came away too easily. No resistance. The nails holding it had been hammered in at odd angles and were already loose. I leaned the mirror against the wall, face down. As I set it down, I caught a glimpse of the wallpaper behind it. The paper was torn in long vertical lines. They looked like scratches. 5 parallel gouges about the width of fingers, trailing down from behind where the mirror had been hanging. I slept on the couch downstairs. The third night, I told my sister I thought the guest room might be messing with my sleep. She made a joke about sleeping pills and offered to swap rooms, but I told her not to worry. I didn't want to seem dramatic. I went back upstairs. I left the mirror on the floor, the window locked, the door cracked open to let in a little hallway light. I lay in bed for hours. Around 2:30 a.m., the light in the hallway went out. I waited, thinking maybe the bulb had gone, but then I heard something shift against the floorboards, like weight moving from one foot to another, just outside the door. 3 soft knocks followed. I didn't move. Then came the whisper. Close. Too close. Not loud, not even words. Just air, pressed through something wet. I shut my eyes and counted to 60. When I opened them again, the hallway light was back on, and the mirror was upright, standing in the exact spot it had been before. I didn't remember hearing it move. Didn't remember hearing anything. I left again, slept in my car that night. The next day, I packed up my things. I made up an excuse about a work emergency and left before sunset. I didn't say anything about the mirror, but 2 weeks later, my sister texted me a photo. They'd finally started peeling back the old wallpaper in that room to prep for painting. Behind where the mirror had hung, they found something strange. A wooden panel, nailed shut, covered in scratches, hundreds of them, some deep enough to splinter the grain. They pulled the panel off. Behind it was a small recess in the wall, about the size of a crawl space, but sealed at the back with brick and cement. Inside were bones. Animal bones, they think. Probably a raccoon or a possum that got trapped when the house was still new. But there was also something else. A piece of fabric. Old, faded. A child's nightshirt, and a length of leather cord, knotted at one end. They asked if I thought it was creepy. I didn't answer, but I went into my closet and pulled out a notebook I hadn't touched in years. One I used to scribble dreams into. There, on the last page I ever wrote, was a note I have no memory of writing. Just 3 words. Let me out. I thought going home for a while might clear my head, but then I found the field again, and something underneath it had been waiting for me. After college, I moved back in with my parents for what was supposed to be a temporary reset. April in Pennsylvania is a strange time. Muddy, quiet, and just cold enough at night to make you think winter might not be done. I'd forgotten how hollow everything feels before the leaves come in. To pass the time, I started walking again. There's a trail behind our shed that winds through a thicket of pines and dips toward a shallow creek. I used to walk it with my dad when I was little. We built a small bridge together, just a few planks of pressure-treated wood, nothing fancy. On the 3rd day home, I crossed it again. Beyond the creek, there's a field. I hadn't stepped into it since I was maybe 12. It always felt like an in-between space. Not quite forest, not quite meadow. Just a patch of overgrown earth where the grass got too tall and nothing ever seemed to grow right. It looked different now. The grass had grown in strange, looping trails. Long, narrow strips of flattened green that bent and curved in unnatural patterns. Not random, not quite paths either. Some were only wide enough for a boot, others just a thin depression in the earth. They seemed to spiral inward toward a low point near the far edge of the field. I stood there for a while, listening. There were no birds, no bugs. Even the wind seemed to pass around the field instead of through it. I left after 5 minutes. But I came back the next day, and the day after that. At first I told myself it was nostalgia, then curiosity, but eventually I stopped lying. I went back because the field made me feel something. Not fear exactly, but attention. Like it was watching me the way a room watches when someone walks in for the first time in a long while. On the 5th visit, I found the depression again. It was more obvious now. A shallow hole at the end of one of the spiraling paths, maybe 2 feet wide, not quite circular. The soil inside was darker than the surrounding dirt. Wet. Breathing in the smell made my stomach tighten. It was sweet and rotten, like decaying fruit in a sealed box. I crouched down, listened. The wind shifted, and I heard breathing. Slow, rhythmic, wet, like someone exhaling under a soaked blanket. I stood up fast. The sound didn't stop. It didn't change. It didn't acknowledge me. It just kept going. I walked home without looking back. That night, I heard something scratching at the side of the house. Not violent, not like claws, just brushing. Back and forth, along the siding. I stared at the ceiling until morning. I asked my mom who used to own the field. She said it belonged to the Thompsons years ago. I remembered them. Quiet family, lived near the dead end by the gas station. Their son went missing in '98. Matthew, 13 years old, disappeared in the spring. Last seen walking the woods behind our street. I remembered the flyers, the police dogs. I remembered that my dad never let me go near the field after that. The next day, I brought gloves, a flashlight, and an old garden trowel. I told myself I wasn't digging, just investigating. But when I got there, the hole was wider. The surrounding grass was dead now, shriveled into straw-colored curls. I stepped carefully, knelt beside it, and used the trowel to push aside the top layer of soil. About 8 inches down, the dirt changed. It wasn't soil anymore. It was wood. I uncovered more. It looked like a crate. Old, rotted at the corners, nailed shut. Something had been buried here. The breathing stopped. I froze, still on my knees. The silence felt deeper than anything I'd ever experienced. Like the entire field had gone underground. I looked around, slowly. No movement, no sound. I pried at the wood until a plank came loose. Inside was something wrapped in heavy plastic. I unrolled it with shaking hands. It wasn't a body. It was a notebook. A red, spiral-bound notebook with mud-caked edges and water-damaged pages. The name scrawled on the inside cover made my chest go tight. Matthew Thompson, room 14. I flipped through it. Most pages were illegible, smeared by years of moisture, but some words remained. One line, written over and over again on the same page. It's quieter in the soil. My flashlight flickered. I hadn't even realized I'd turned it on. I looked down again and noticed something. The hole was deeper. Not dramatically, just enough that the edge was closer to my knees now. As if the earth had subtly inhaled beneath me. The breathing started again, louder, closer. I dropped the notebook, scrambled up, and backed away, eyes on the hole. The plastic wrapping inside the crate had begun to pulse, just barely, like something was shifting under it. I ran, didn't stop until I hit the creek and nearly slipped off the bridge. My legs were soaked by the time I made it home. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't call the police. I just put the notebook in a plastic bag and shoved it to the back of my closet. That night, I dreamed I was back in the field. Except the field was gone. Just the hole, endless, widening, and something crawling out of it. Not fast, not desperate, just steady, impatient, like it had waited long enough. When I woke up, my window was open. Blossoms from the dogwood tree outside were scattered across the floor. My shoes were wet. I never went back to the field. I moved out 2 weeks later and haven't visited home since, but I still have the notebook. I've read every page I could recover. There's one entry near the back that haunts me more than the others. It just says, "The field was never empty. It just knew how to wait."
She called 911, but no one came. A rookie cop found her body in a motel. No witnesses, no backup, just blood and a phone still recording. The voice on that phone, it said, "Don't let him take me." I was supposed to protect her, but someone higher up wanted her gone. They shut me down. My partner got shot, and the guy calling the shots, he wore a badge too. That's when I learned justice doesn't wait for permission. Some cases stay with you. This one never left. Don't let him take me.